Is this boring to you?
No, I like it.
Yeah, well, I love it. Everything that's good that's happened to me in my life came because of that. I might not do everything great in my life. Okay, I'm not perfect. I'm not the best husband, and I'm sorry if I wasn't the best father. But I'm good at this. And I want to share this with you. I want to teach you what I learned. I get to touch people's lives with what I do. And it keeps me going, and I love it. And I think if you give it a shot, you might love it too.
Hello and welcome to the Weekly Reel podcast. My name is Ken.
My name is Jeremy.
And we are so glad to have you all listening to us again this week. Jeremy, how have you been the last week since we recorded our last episode?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I mean, last week I talked about some of my cat adventures last week. So I do have an update on that, actually. Well, if you didn't catch last week's episode, I did find like a stray cat found me actually on my front door, and we took care of it for a while. But unfortunately, since the last time we recorded, it hasn't come back.
Oh,
So that kind of sucks. I know, like last week, I was like, I'm trying not to get attached. And then I got attached. And I was like, oh. And then when we were done recording, I gave it some food. And then it's like, all right, see you tomorrow. And then didn't come back. So I don't know.
Man. I'm hoping that the cat's okay at least, or maybe got returned to its rightful owner or something. I just want the cat to be safe, hopefully.
Yeah, we put out a post saying like, if you've seen this cat, just let us know that either it's okay or bring it back to us. Yeah.
What, on Nextdoor or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Nextdoor.
Okay.
Not sponsored. All the time, man. How about
Seriously.
you, man? How you been doing?
Been good. Actually took today off from work, and it was actually the first day that I took off since last year. It was actually the day before Stanley's birthday in late December. And the reason why I knew this was at the end of the day yesterday, I was, putting my auto reply response, and it said, "Hey, I'll be out on December 27. Be back on whatever day it was." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, it's already been more like almost 8 months since the last time I actually took a day off." And so it was definitely needed. Got a chance to kind of recharge my batteries a little bit and focus on today's podcast. And so it was pretty cool. And also this past weekend, I got to prepare a little bit for today's episode by getting takeout at one of my favorite restaurants. But we'll get to that a little bit later.
Teasing me now. Dang it.
Yeah,
I want to know, where did you go?
Oh, we're saving that for later. So we wanted to take this time, especially in these early episodes, to have all of our listeners get to know us a little bit more. And so I wanted to ask you, Jeremy, like at least one question every time, like I'm the host on a given week, so that we can actually share a little bit of ourselves and our interests to the listeners out there. And so this week I thought of this question, and the question is, what podcasts do you listen to?
Well, there are a couple that I do want to mention. The first being Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. So if you don't know who Michael Rosenbaum is, I'll let you know. He's an actor, basically from Smallville fame, the TV show, the pre-Superman TV show, and he played Lex Luthor. And I want to say he's probably my favorite Lex Luthor of like all time.
I agree. He's underrated, I think.
Yeah. And in his podcast, he basically interviews other celebrities. Like I know he's had like Dave Bautista on there, Zachary Levi, a bunch of other celebrities on there, and they talk about just basically about themselves, and whatever they want to talk about. It's a very entertaining podcast, and he's hilarious at the same time. He's crazy, but that's besides the point. Crazy, hilarious guy, and I recommend checking it out. The other podcast that I listen to is somewhat of a similar name to ours. Ours is the Weekly Reel. Theirs is the Weekly Planet. It's also a movie podcast, but I was able to find this podcast because he has a YouTube channel called Mr. Sunday Movies, where it basically gives like a lot of movie trivia, movie reviews, and those guys they're like hilarious. I think they're Australian, but those guys are like super funny. So I recommend checking those guys out if you like movies and want like a bunch of jokes. I think they did like a whole series on the Transformers, the Michael Bay Transformers movies. Ooh, they ripped those apart. So
Really? Even the first one, huh?
even the first one. I mean, they say all of them is pretty much the worst Transformers movie. Obviously, they're a little bit more lenient on the first one because it's not bad. Not really a guilty pleasure because I think it was actually a good time. But who knows? Maybe we'll talk about that if sometime in the future.
Yeah, maybe if they have any new Transformers content out there. Yeah, so interesting. And kind of going back to your Lex Luthor, I mean, I just remember the time when we went to New York and we ended up seeing Lex's dad, Lionel Luthor. Yeah, what was his name? John Glover.
John Glover,
Sorry.
and he's actually on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast.
Really?
Yeah, he was. They had a very funny conversation. I think that's a good one to listen to if you're interested, because we saw him on the subway in New York. Do you want to go into detail with that, Ken, and how we met? Not met him. Actually, we never said hi. We were too scared to. No, not that we were too scared.
Well, it took us a while to recognize who he was. I think it was your brother that actually recognized him the first time, but he was like, so I guess starstruck. He couldn't really talk. He was just like,
yeah.
And then he eventually got the words out. And then by the time we were trying to strategize on ways where maybe we can like not really bug him, but at least say hi and maybe let him know that we're huge fans of Smallville, the TV show. He ended up arriving at his subway stop and
we did.
Oh, we did. Sorry,
you're
right.
Yeah,
you're right.
He stayed there, but we're like, oh shoot, why do we have to get off at the next stop? Why can't we just stay on this subway train and just say hi for once? But you did get like I think you and him caught a glance.
Yeah, we locked eyes just for a little bit, and I was able to get a little bit of vlog footage. It was just clear enough where I could freeze frame it, and you could definitely see make it out that it was John Glover. So I just thought it was pretty funny since you mentioned Michael Rosenbaum in the podcast, and the fact that he was a guest on it was pretty cool too.
Yeah, dude. Right now, Lex's dad. We met Lex's dad. But how about you, man? How what podcast do you listen to?
Well, mainly I listen to mainly two genres of podcasts. I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts. Is the reason why. That's the reason why I wanted to start a pop culture podcast, mainly with movies. And so the first one is called The Watch. It's on the Ringer Podcast Network. I enjoy listening to those two guys, and they do talk about mainly TV, but then they'll mention stuff that's related to pop culture, what's going on at that time. They'll even talk about big movie releases and everything. And so that's a really good one to pay attention to. And the episodes aren't terribly long too, so they range to 30-40 minutes. So it's a good podcast to kind of pick up, listen to in the background, or if you're out out and about, going for a run or something like that. The other podcast that I wanted to highlight is the other genre that I do listen to mainly is I listen to a lot of sports podcasts. And one of the newer ones that I've caught on recently in recent months is called All the Smoke. And it's by two former basketball players. They're retired now, but then they used to be members of the We Believe Golden State Warriors team that upset the Dallas Mavericks in the 06-07 season. That was like probably my favorite time as a fan because they had been so horrible for so long. And so they're known for just being real, and it comes off as authentic on the podcast, and they have good guests, and then their interview style is just raw, and it's just a really good podcast because it's real.
Dang, didn't we go to a game together at some point during that time?
Yes, yeah.
What year was that?
I think it was maybe the year after. Actually, they were still pretty decent. I think Matt Barnes wasn't on that team any longer, but those teams just had a lot of grit, and just to be able to root for like a bunch of underdogs, and the fact that they were able to upset the number one seed in that We Believe season, it just resonated a lot with the fans. And this is before obviously the championship years within the last 5 or 6 years or however long it's been with Steph Curry and all them. But yeah, it was good times for sure. We should definitely go whenever they allow people
Large
back
events again. Yeah.
Oh man. But so we've reached the part in our podcast where we are going to talk about we're going to get into our podcast ritual. And so every week we want to talk about a notable movie or TV show. I mean, we are a movie podcast after all, and we want to kind of share what we've been watching in the past week. And so, Jeremy, what's one notable movie or TV show that you've gotten into in the past week?
Well, one movie I've actually watched on HBO Max, so I'll continue that ritual of mentioning where I watched it. It's a movie on HBO Max, Twins, with
Really?
Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito.
Oh my goodness, that's a classic. I haven't seen that movie in decades. That's a good one.
It's a good one because I've basically seen all of Arnold's movies, like even the bad ones. But Twins is not one of the bad ones. It's actually pretty funny, and it's like Arnold's first like comedy movie too, and you know he's good in it. It's like 1988. It's a classic Arnold movie.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that's a good one. That's a good one. I haven't seen that in a while. I'm actually gonna keep that theme of 1988 because that's the year that my movie came out, the one that I watched.
Wait, all right.
It's not planned, by the way. I'm hearing this for the first time, and Jeremy's hearing this for the first time. The movie that I watched, and I watched it on Hulu, so we're not matching this week, but I watched it on Hulu. It's Rain Man, starring Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. Oh man, it's such a good movie. Actually, the first thing that I noticed when I first watched the movie is the opening song. I looked it up. It's called Iko Iko by the Bell Stars. One thing I noticed is that it's the same song that The Hangover spoofed in that one Las Vegas scene when they're going down the escalator, and they basically shot for shot did the whole thing with the same song. But one thing I realized is that that's the same song it's the same song that plays in the beginning of Mission Impossible 2 on Tom Cruise's first scene when he's still climbing up the rocks. It's the same song. I just thought it was funny. 2 Tom Cruise movies and it's the same song.
Dang, that's weird, man. And basically totally different decades.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. I mean, he's got something weird with his hair going on in Rain Man. It's like got a weird feathered look, and then obviously Mission Impossible, he's got the flowing locks just blowing in the wind as he's like trying to climb rocks or whatever. But yeah, I just thought it was a pretty funny coincidence. And you know what? Tom Cruise is so underrated in Rain Man because Dustin Hoffman's performance is just an all-time performance, so you don't really notice it, but he's so good. And one last thing that I wanted to bring up is that Dustin Hoffman is so lovable in that movie, and it's so weird because it's so different than the movie that we're about to talk about. He's just like a hated individual in the movie that we're going to be talking about. And so there's another teaser for later on in this episode. And so before we get into this week's movie, let's do a little bit of Weekly Reel podcast cleanup. And so in the first 2 weeks for episodes 1 and 2, we actually ran polls for both episodes. And so, Jeremy, do you want to reveal what the first poll was for episode 1?
Yeah, our first poll for episode 1 was based on Dumb and Dumber. And we basically were asking everyone who was dumber, Harry or Lloyd? Right.
And so here are the results of that poll. And we actually had the poll on, well, this particular time, we only had it on Facebook and Instagram. Jeremy still hasn't heard this, but the results were this. It was 50-50. 50%.
No, come on.
Yeah, it was a little anticlimactic, but I guess it's right? I mean, they're both just really dumb.
Yeah, I think that was the only fitting way to end the poll. Because who's Dumb and Dumber? Both of them.
Yes, they are. Why don't you go ahead and also introduce the poll that we ran for episode 2, last week's episode?
Yeah, in last week's episode, we talked about 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first 3 movies in that universe, which was Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 2. And so we based our poll based on The Incredible Hulk. And, the infamous recasting there with Edward Norton and into Mark Ruffalo. So we basically asked, who do we prefer in terms of their interpretation of Bruce Banner / Hulk? Edward Norton or Mark Ruffalo?
Right. And I have the results here. And again, they were really, really close, but it looks like everyone disagreed with both me and Jeremy in that Mark Ruffalo, they felt was the better Bruce Banner and Hulk it was 55% to 45%. It was really close, but they disagreed with us. I don't know. I feel like they needed to give Edward Norton a chance. I felt like he was just more layered as an actor.
Yeah, but I can definitely see their side on Mark Ruffalo, especially if they base it off of the first Avengers. Mm-hmm. I can see where they could make a point there.
Oh, and you know what? I will admit he is a likable character in all of his appearances, especially when he's playing the comedic role, like in Ragnarok or some of the more recent movies, especially Sparkle.
Yeah, I think Mark Ruffalo also just has that more. He's more approachable looking as a person.
He is, and I think that's what we discussed last week. In that Edward Norton kind of gives a little bit more of an introspective take on Bruce Banner. And so, yeah. So that being said, I wanted to mention this to all of our listeners. Just keep an eye out for future episode related polls. We're going to try to put these on all the platforms on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we'll post these every Tuesday. So we are still releasing episodes every Monday. So the next day we are going to have an episode related poll. And so for the next part of the podcast, we are going to introduce this brand new premise, well, basically this idea that we came up with, me and Jeremy, even before we actually were going to do the podcast. We were just really bouncing ideas off of each other on what would be an interesting premise for a podcast. And so COVID-19 kind of put a wrench in a lot of people's plannings. I mean, like there hasn't really been new content in a long time, especially out in movie theaters for obvious reasons. And so one of the ideas that we had thought of and we ended up developing is that because there is a lack of new content, but we wanted to still watch new movies. And so even though both me and Jeremy have very similar tastes with a certain kind of movie, like some mainstream blockbusters, in terms of the other movies that we do watch, there are differences. So there are a lot of movies that I've seen that he hasn't, and vice versa. There's a lot of movies that Jeremy has seen that I haven't. Right, Jeremy?
Yeah, because you know we do have different tastes. Definitely, Ken's more experienced with some of the classics than I am. Like for example, Rain Man. I actually haven't seen Rain Man, even though I've seen a lot of Tom Cruise movies. I haven't had a chance to see Rain Man yet. I've seen that it's been on Netflix for a while, and I
Oh
still
my
haven't gotten a chance to it.
Oh my goodness. We might have to make a future episode on that. Maybe further down the line, but oh dude.
But I know Ken hasn't seen one of my. I don't want to hype it up too much. I don't want to talk too much about my ranking of it. But basically, next week's episode will be on 2014's Nightcrawler, and Ken hasn't seen that yet, and that's
Yes.
definitely a good one in my opinion. But it's just I wanted to share it with him.
Yeah, and this is the reason why we're basically starting this podcast. I mean, we have a lot of movies that we've seen, but there are a huge there's just a huge database, right, for all these movies that have come out. And I know there's a lot of movies that we both haven't seen. And so we'll definitely revisit those. But in the meantime, we are just introducing this premise. And so this week happens to be a week where we're sharing one of my favorite movies that I enjoy. And Jeremy hasn't seen it yet. And so the movie that we are going to do a deep dive is Chef. And so for those of you who need a refresher, Chef is a feel-good story about a head chef whose professional and personal life are broken, and he somehow needs to figure out a way to piece everything back together by getting back to his cooking roots. And so, Jeremy, this was the first time that you watched Chef. Are there any initial thoughts on the movie?
Well, initial thoughts on the movie. Like last week, you asked me like, um, what do I expect like from this movie? And basically, I gave you all my thoughts of knowing like what I knew about the movie before, and I really thought it was like about this food truck. I didn't really know too much that it was like he was a professional chef. And I guess in this world of the movie, he's almost like Gordon Ramsay level. And
Yep,
I didn't expect that. I didn't expect him to be like that high profile of a chef. And it's written and directed by Jon Favreau, right?
correct. And that's why I figured, even though you hadn't seen it, you would like it. Just the fact that a lot of the characters that are in the movie are in movies that we enjoy and we're entertained by. So Jeremy, why didn't you watch Chef when it originally came out?
Well, I remember like hearing about the movie when it came out in 2014. And I remember hearing it got good reviews. Don't worry, I didn't like look up the Rotten Tomatoes score again for our later segment, that little game that we play. But considering it was like it's an indie film, right? So that's probably why it's not on most people's radar. Especially, I looked up when it came out. It's like May 30 of 2014. And at that point in time, 2014 was a good year for movies. But Chef came out May 30, 2014, and Amazing Spider-Man 2 and X-Men Days of Future Past both came out in May of that month, in May of that year. And so I remember going to both of those movies in the theater, and that's probably why I didn't watch Chef, because I was really into watching these superhero movies, and Days of Future Past was good.
Mm.
Amazing Spider-Man 2, not so much. Yeah.
Oh, you know what, that does make sense. You know, it's funny, and we'll get into it when I get there. I actually didn't watch it in the theater as well, so a little bit of a preview there. But Jeremy, what were your overall thoughts now that you have seen the movie? What were your thoughts on the movie?
Well, first of all, it made me hungry. Like honestly, I knew I had to grab a snack like in the middle of the movie when I was watching it. I'm like, I need some food right now, man. This is making me too hungry. It was actually a bit of a torture to watch it
Yeah.
because it's making me hungry too much, man. But that's when you know it's um it brings out the foodie in you. I think it's a fun, laid back movie. All the food looked so good.
Oh, I know.
Um, though I guess if I had to nitpick something about the movie is once I guess spoilers, I guess. Once the food truck got started, he
Mhm.
didn't really Carl, the main character, didn't really face too many problems after that because I think he basically got the food truck at like the midpoint of the movie. And
Yeah.
normally you expect at least maybe one more problem after that. And I thought it would be either like with his son or with like the police or something like that little uh, event that happens. But yeah, that's just a bit of a nitpick. But
Yeah.
overall, you know, I had like it was a very laid back movie. You can just like basically chill and eat some popcorn with it, kettle corn.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a feel good movie. I do agree with you there in that he didn't really he didn't really have any obstacles after he did get the truck. I mean, they just had that one argument with he had that one argument with the son, and that was for the most part it. And then with the cop and everything, I mean, really wasn't that much. So um, everything just seemed to work out, and I think because he had been going through a lot of stuff beforehand, and we'll get into like all the details and everything as we continue with this episode. I think all of his struggles were early on, and I think they just really wanted this to be a feel good movie, and not really kind of dwell into the struggling part of it, because I felt like they already kind of did a pretty good job in portraying that in the first half of the movie. But yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, I was surprised on how long he actually struggled for it. Like, I was like, "Oh, dang, we're already halfway in this movie, and he still didn't get his food truck." But so I agree. Like, if that was their intention of like making it like a feel good movie, you know, I can forgive that because of how much struggle he did have in the first half of the movie. Because man, so much frustration in the beginning, and just watching like Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, it reminded me so much of like the first half of this movie. So, Ken, what was your personal experience with the film?
Well, before I get into that, I actually wanted to pick up where I left off earlier in the beginning of the episode with that teaser. I kind of wanted to catch everyone up on what I've been up to this past weekend. Actually, we're recording this on a Wednesday, but going into this week, I was really hyped about hosting this episode because I knew we were going to talk about Chef. I got so hyped that this past weekend I made a trek out to the North Bay to San Rafael. It's about 45-minute drive from where I live, and we drove to Soul Food. You remember Soul Food, right? We went there for my birthday that one time. There was like a bunch of us.
Shoot, how come I don't remember that?
You were with us, weren't you?
I need to look at pictures.
Yeah, you were there. And we just had like it's this place where think of a very colorful, like kind of like a Chevy's where it's like super it's super energetic, it's bright colors, there's a lot of good food, but you know, obviously in COVID times, everything's just done through takeout or delivery. Anyway, I ended up going there in preparation for this episode, and it's Puerto Rican food. But the things that I ordered for takeout, check this out, Jeremy. I
Mhm.
ordered a Cubano sandwich.
Nice.
And I ate that right then and there, or you know, wherever we ended up eating. But I also took home some arroz con pollo, chicken and rice. Took home some tostones, which is that banana, it's like plantain, and it's cooked and fried and it's so good. And I took home some mariquitas, which is like plantain chips. And so I just thought it was a fun way to kind of get into Chef Week for me by eating some of the food that they did feature in the movie. And so,
So I actually did Google the place real quick just to refresh my memory, and I'm pretty sure I did go there with you. I'm pretty sure I did order a sandwich also.
yeah, right.
Looking at the pictures now, it brought me back. I'm like, oh shoot, yeah.
There was a lot of us. And that place isn't really known for being a place that can handle big groups, but we ended up going like 15 to 17 people deep, with several small groups eating just kind of separately, but kind of together. But we found a way. We were able to celebrate my birthday, and it was it's so good. But anyway, kind of going back to Chef, kind of bringing it in. The first time I ended up watching the movie, and I alluded to it earlier, I never watched the movie in the theater, but I watched it as soon as it became available on Netflix in 2015. It was the summer, I believe. And it was on a random lazy Sunday. I didn't feel like doing anything, watched it. And I just loved it because, it's a good feel-good movie. It's a popcorn flick, just like Jeremy mentioned. And I liked it so much that the following week after I watched, because I probably watched it maybe twice, I went to the Gilroy Garlic Festival that year with a group of friends, and we literally spent the whole day eating like nonstop. We just literally ate, and it was hot, and yeah, we just ate the whole day. And so from where Gilroy is to where I live, it takes about an hour to get back. And so we were on our way back to my friend's house. But on the way there, we're talking about the movie Chef. And I was like, hey, you guys got to watch Chef. And it's on Netflix. It'll just make you hungry. And I think because we were just talking about, we talked ourselves into getting hungry. And what we ended up doing was we ended up stopping by the grocery store, picked up ingredients to make the famous grilled cheese sandwich that was featured in the movie. We looked up a recipe, and after eating for like literally nonstop for the whole day, we ate some more. We ate the grilled cheese sandwiches, and that just segues perfectly into our first topic of the episode. And so, Jeremy, what was your single favorite dish from Chef?
Dude, well, you mentioned the grilled cheese, man, and I would have to pick that because, dude, just when he brought it out, the way he cooked that, and then when he sliced it in half, you can hear the crunch. Ah, dude, man, you hear the crunch, and then when he just lays in front of Percy, his son, and you can see like the cheese coming out the side. Ah. And it brings me back to the time when I'm pretty sure you watched Chef by that point. We actually had a karaoke party, and you cooked us grilled cheese.
Yeah, I actually was inspired by that, Chef. I actually put a little bit of a twist on it. This one was a little bit different. Made a flaming hot Cheeto grilled cheese, right?
Mm-hmm, that was good too. Ooh.
That was good. I should probably make that again.
I know.
We're just
send me one.
I will do so. I'll drop it off 6 feet. We'll social distance. I'll just drop it at your doorstep.
Yeah, Postmates from Ken.
Yeah, exactly. Ken meets. But it's just to kind of add to that, it not only the crunch, but remember where they're talking about it in the scene where I guess they were trying to create Carl's Twitter handle, right? And he's like eating it, and you can hear the crunch, but also the cheese pulls were so epic that were happening in the background while they were talking about the Twitter. I just thought I'd add that to what you were talking about earlier.
And that's messed up. He was eating Percy's grilled cheese. He made it for him, and then he just started eating it. But yeah, the cheese pulls, man, looks so good.
Yeah. When I came up with the topic for for this podcast, that's actually why I brought it up, is because I wanted to say the grilled cheese too. It's for the same reasons as Jeremy, but to give a more context to that story, to add to the story that I mentioned earlier about that Gilroy Garlic Festival trip. When we finally got back and we went to when we got back from the grocery store to make the grilled cheese, this is what we did, Jeremy. So when we were cooking, we were literally emulating frame for frame the actual scene. So we actually on Spotify, we're not sponsored by Spotify, but if you want to, go ahead and sponsor Spotify. We played the song that was playing in that scene, and we just played it on repeat the whole time while we were making grilled cheese, and we were doing the whole like DJ thing with the sourdough butter
The
on the
butter too,
grill.
man. The
Dude,
butter.
and so we were literally recreating that whole scene. And so just thought I'd continue that story because my answer is also the grilled cheese. But since we do have to mention at least one other thing, I want to give an honorable mention to that pasta dish that he made for Molly, aka Scarlett Johansson. That pasta dish looks so good, and it looked really simple to make. It looked, doable, and I kind of want to look up a recipe to see if I could go ahead and make that one of these days.
My
That looked really.
honorable mention, though, remember when he was cooking the hash browns?
Oh, dude.
Dude, when he was like lifting them up a little bit and then putting them back down, then cutting them to squares. Ooh, satisfying.
Yeah. Carbs are my kryptonite.
Yeah,
That's why I mentioned the
seriously.
pasta.
I like potatoes. That's why I mentioned hash browns.
The other question that I wanted to bring to you, Jeremy, for our listeners is that, I mean, we're obviously discussing a movie that has an obvious food theme. And so, but then, Chef Carl Casper's storylines are featured prominently in this movie. And if you do a little bit of a deeper dive, you'll notice that there are two things that Carl struggles with. And so I was wondering which you felt was more compelling. Carl's relationship with his son Percy, that whole storyline, or did you find Carl's professional journey as a chef more compelling?
Well, personally for me, I felt like his relationship with his son Percy was more compelling to me, and I felt like that the all the imagery of the food was icing on the cake, no pun intended, kind of. Uh, because I think going into the movie, I didn't expect the movie to involve family a lot, and Percy, his son, I think is such a good character, but you do run the risk with like these young child actors coming off as like annoying kids.
Mhm.
But this kid, his son, is such a likable character too. Of course, he has like kid tendencies and all that stuff, like you don't love me or something like that. But it's that's kids. But he didn't come off as annoying at any point, and you're like, oh man, his dad's kind of a jerk sometimes for like neglecting him. And I thought that was a really compelling part of the story.
No, I agree. Actually, just to add to your point, I just thought that Percy was actually such a well-written character. He was actually one of the better kid characters that I remember watching, like, because like you said, a lot of the times kid actors or kid, the characters, they're just annoying more than anything. And
Mhm.
I felt like I can I can actually identify with like his personal journey, just taking it back to when we were kids.
Yeah, because uh, yeah, he was written so well, Percy, and I just the way their relationship forms throughout the movie, I thought was really nice.
Yeah, it was actually pretty surprising that I saw that was actually one of the main themes, especially in a movie that has food at its center. But actually, I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm going to say that I felt that the professional journey as a chef was more compelling to me. And I don't know if it's because where I'm currently at in my I guess in my own personal life. Like for me, I'm at that point in my life where, I'm just trying to I'm still trying to find my way like professionally. I'm, obviously trying to move up in my day job. But also, there's a lot of things going on in my personal life where I just needed to take a step back. I needed to just kind of strip things down. And I felt like Chef Carl Casper he basically took a step back and he kind of got back to his roots, and he was able to kind of slowly start rebuilding on like a more solid foundation. And I feel like that's where I'm currently at right now. Like I'm at that point where I'm still slowly rebuilding like my foundation so that I can kind of slowly add more things on my plate moving forward. And so that's the reason why I ended up finding Carl's professional journey, especially given where I'm at right now to this date. So I don't know. Did you kind of feel that kind of way in terms of like where you're at with your professional journey?
Yeah, I mean, I thought what was so interesting about his professional journey was basically like he was doing what he loves, cooking, but he just wasn't doing it the way he wanted to. And I think that's something that everyone wants to strive for professionally. Basically, do what they love and do it how they want to do it. And I thought, just the way the movie portrayed it was um, a good progression, because he basically got knocked down. He couldn't find a job anywhere else, and so he had to make his own way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's part of the reason why, like I really wanted to start this podcast. I wanted to do something that I love to do. And it's definitely one of those things that it's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I made time for, because it's, I mean, starting to get up there a little bit in age, and I kind of wanted to do something for me for a change, And so that's pretty much the reason why, in a movie that I've seen like several times, probably close to 10 times, just rewatching it from this lens where I'm currently at just was kind of eye-opening. It actually was a surprise to me when I rewatched it this past weekend.
Yeah, some movies, man, just like it depends on timing, really how hard they hit you.
So yeah, once again, we want to make sure that we communicate to all of you listeners out there that this podcast is an open dialogue. Me and Jeremy want to make sure that this is an open dialogue, between us, and also between you guys, the listeners. And so every week we want to at least, try to ask a question to start a conversation with you guys. And so the question that we wanted to mention to you guys or ask of you guys is, what are some of your favorite food-centric movies? Jeremy, do you have any others besides Chef?
Well, it was kind of hard to choose because I don't think there's a lot of food centric films. So I actually have to Google like best food movies. And one surprising one that came up was The Land Before Time. The, the animated dinosaur movie. And I remember watching that a lot as a kid. And I was thinking, man, the way they eat those leaves is so satisfying for some reason. So it's kind of random, but that's mine.
Did it make you want to eat a salad?
Yeah, it's like, they make salads look so good, dinosaurs.
Is that why you like? Is that why you like the one from Maldonado's?
The one from Maldonado's. Ken's talking about a pizza place. They just put a lot of ranch and cheese and mushrooms. Basically, not a lot of leaves.
That was more of a sarcastic joke.
Yeah,
and so I'm glad you explained it. Anyway, some of the food-centric movies that I actually had to look it up just to make sure that I didn't miss any. But in addition to Chef, two came to mind. One was Soul Food. I love that movie. And then the other was that Pixar movie, Ratatouille. I really love that movie too. So you should definitely check those out. And so if you want to send us some of your favorite food-centric movies, you can go ahead and send us a comment. We'll actually post something on Twitter. And so if you want to comment there, Jeremy, what is our Twitter handle again?
@WeeklyReel.
Yes, it is @WeeklyReel. And also you can send us an email with that same feedback. You can send that to weeklyreelpod@gmail.com. And so, Jeremy, let's go ahead and take a break. All right, and we're back. And so we've reached the part in the podcast where it's awards time. And you know what? We're going to call it the Weekly Reel Awards. And so, last week we had our first MCU centered episode. And since both me and Jeremy are huge fans of the MCU, and we had such a blast recording last week's episode, you know what? We decided to rename the awards that we did introduce in episode 1. We decided to rename those awards so that they had a little bit of an MCU twist. And so the first award that we wanted to give out is what we're calling the Marissa Tomei / Aunt May Award. And if you remember, her character is in both MCU Spider-Man films. And so this award is for what has aged well, just like Marissa Tomei, like fine wine. And so, Jeremy, why don't you give us your winner for what has aged the best?
Yeah, well, in terms of aging, I think what's always hard is like social media and technology, whatever they show there. And so when they started like showing Twitter a lot and using the graphics for Twitter, that could like really spell disaster sometimes in terms of dating itself, and especially the way they present it. But I actually thought they did a really good job of presenting it in an interesting way, Twitter at least, the way they presented it. Because sometimes, like, for example, I think there was a movie called, it was with Liam Neeson on the plane. I think it was called Nonstop. I think it involves texts. And those type of graphics can really wear you down in a movie if they keep utilizing them. And when they kept doing that with Twitter in this one, I actually found that being Twitter having a focal point in the movie was actually entertaining. I was surprised.
I completely agree. That was actually one of the ones that I thought of as well. But just to kind of bring that point where it wouldn't have aged so well is kind of going back to the first Mission Impossible when they were talking. Remember when they were showing Tom Cruise like typing stuff on the internet and it just looked really dated? If you rewatch it again, like now or whatever, you'll know what I'm talking about if you don't remember. But yeah, it could definitely be really a huge miss further down the line. So completely agree with you on that. My winner actually for the Marissa Tomei Aunt May Award is the foodie scene. And I feel like the foodie scene is still as popular as it was when the movie came out in 2014. And even especially with food trucks. I mean, there's like food trucks are still like very prominent part of the of today's society, even with COVID-19. I feel like COVID-19 is really the only thing that's kind of slowed it down. But even then, there's still like ways where, as long as you social distance and have a mask or whatever, you could still get food at these food trucks and just out in general. And so just the foodie scene is something that I did notice that's still super relevant in 2020. And so the next award that we did want to give out, especially since our main character was played by Jon Favreau. So in honor of Jon Favreau, we wanted to give this next award, and we're going to name it the Happy Hogan Mullet Memorial Award. And if you remember, he had the mullet rocking in Iron Man 3. And the reason why we're giving out the Happy Hogan Mullet Memorial Award is, well, it's for what has not aged well. And so, Jeremy, what is your winner?
Yeah, well, we did have a consensus winner between the both of us. And when you watch the movie, it may be kind of obvious, and that's mentioning of Vine.
Yeah.
And now, who knows, maybe TikTok will be the new Vine sometime in the future if it'll keep going. But yeah, when they mentioned Vine, I'm like, oh, good times. It reminds me of high school.
Yeah, the original TikTok.
Original TikTok that I still don't have either of them. So
yeah. I don't think you'll ever need it.
Yeah.
But yes, R.I.P. Vine. But yeah, that was the obvious winner I did want to do an honorable mention though, and Jeremy still hasn't heard this yet, but I wanted to give this honorable mention. I don't know if you remember in the beginning of the movie when was it Riva? I think that's his name. Dustin Hoffman's character.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about how Ramsey Michelle, the food blogger that was played by Oliver Platt,
Mm-hmm.
was talking about how he was the most popular critic out there, food critic, and that his blog was being sold to AOL for 10 million.
Yeah. Dude.
Is AOL still? Are they still around? I don't even know.
Well, you don't hear much about them. I think that line went by so fast that I didn't catch it. But now that you mention it, I'm like, yeah, that nearing the end of the movie, right? He's like, I sold my blog to AOL. I'm like,
yeah, they mentioned it again. Yeah, later in the movie, but yeah, they mentioned it twice. It's so funny. Did you have an
like
AOL
a screen name?
information a screen name? Yeah.
Well, I actually still use the email. I do still have the email, but I do remember having a screen name, which is actually my gamer tag for my Xbox and PlayStation 4 and all that stuff. So it still lives on somewhere.
So, but that's where the legacy started, right?
Yeah, that's where it all started. The screen names, talking to the bots. If you felt that lonely.
Oh man. Oh, AOL. Well, you know what? Let's get into the next award. The next award that we wanted to give out is the Why is Gamora Award. And if you remember in Avengers Infinity War, that was one of the classic funny lines that wait, who gave that line out again?
Drax the Destroyer, Dave Bautista.
Drax the Destroyer. Yes, you are correct. So he uttered those famous words, "Why is Gamora?" And so the Why is Gamora Award is for favorite quote. And so Jeremy, why don't you give us your winner?
Well, my favorite quote of Chef has to come from Marvin, played by Robert Downey Jr. And he plays what's Carl's wife's name again?
It's Inez.
Nez, yes. So it's Nez's ex-husband. And I thought, they had such a funny chemistry together, Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. And then when they're having this hilarious back and forth, one thing that he says under his breath is, "You're not a turd that lost." And I'm like, dang, dude, you're really just beating this guy down when he's really down in the dirt. And he's like, "You're not a turd that lost." To really trying to bring him up, but he's not helping him. I thought that was so funny. And the way Robert Downey Jr. delivered every line in that scene, so funny.
Yeah, I love their dynamic because it's a similar dynamic to what they have in the all the MCU movies, but then the roles are reversed because obviously Carl is the main character and Marvin is just basically that he's just in that one scene. And so I just thought it was pretty funny. That was a good one. I actually missed that before you mentioned it in our pre-production meeting. That was pretty funny. My favorite quote and the winner for Why is Gamora is the part in the movie where they were teaching Percy how to make the Cubano sandwiches. And so Martin is basically asking Percy, is like, "Hey, you know what? Is the grill hot?" And so he basically sets it up like this. He goes, "Is it hot?" And then Carl is actually showing Percy how to, test if the grill's hot by just tossing some water. And then, you see the steam. He sees the steam and he says, "Yes, it's hot." And then Martin basically gives a classic one-liner. He goes, "Is it as hot as your daddy's underwear?" It's such a throwaway line if you're not really paying attention. It's something that you can miss. But man, I just thought it was funny the way John Leguizamo delivered that. It was just hilarious.
Yeah, a lot of the lines in this movie, or a lot of the best lines in this movie, are the throwaway lines almost.
Oh, I agree. And actually, I wanted to give an honorable mention to this one. And this one's actually a callback to, again, the MCU. And so later on in that same scene, they're talking about like adding a sound system to the food truck. And so they're talking about how, you know what, they're still not charging for food yet. And so, you know, they, you know, just take it easy on the sound system. But Martin has like a hookup. And so Martin goes, basically acknowledges that, you know, like basically how things are like turning around for Carl. And so Martin says, "Yeah, but you look happy, baby, don't you?" And Carl, John Favreau, goes, "So happy, so happy." And it's definitely not a funny line, but I just thought it was just like a kind of like a wink wink line, because John Favreau's character in the MCU is Happy Hogan. And I just thought it was funny that he was acknowledging that he was so happy, so happy.
Yeah, there's a lot of wink winks to the Iron Man universe, because there was that Iron Man repulsor sound when he brought Percy to the movie theater.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Oh, you did not? I thought you.
No,
I thought
I
that was
didn't
like
get
one of the
that.
clear ones. Shoot. Yeah, because he
Good
took
one.
him to the movie, and I guess they were watching Iron Man.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't even catch that. Now I got to rewatch it just for that. Oh man, but yeah, those were some good funny quotes. Let's actually move on to the next award, and this, I mean, we actually kind of introduced this last week a little bit, but the next award that we're going to hand out is the Stan Lee Award for Best Cameo. And so, Jeremy, why don't you give us your winner?
I think for me, it has to be clearly Robert Downey Jr. He had that one scene, and every line that he said was so funny. Like his receptionist was pregnant, but now with his baby, because it's like my tubes were tied. And then he's like, "Oh, then choose my carpet. Oh, should I choose to have the baby or not?" And all that stuff. And I thought that was such a golden scene in that movie. Stole the show.
No, he was very eccentric in that
Yeah.
he was so Tony Stark, but without like a ton of money. But he was just super eccentric. Like he still played that character, and it was funny too because it was again one scene and he stole the show, just like you said.
Mm-hmm.
My winner actually is Russell Peters, and he plays the Miami cop. And you thought, oh, you know, this is where maybe things might kind of go bad for Martin, Carl, and Percy when they're selling their food for the first time in South Beach. And so Russell Peters plays the Miami cop. He literally is coming up there, and you know, at first I didn't really recognize him, but when he took his sunglasses off, I was like, oh, that's Russell Peters. And then I just thought it was funny during that part where it's like, oh, can I take a picture with you? Because he did recognize him from the whole viral YouTube video of him like just losing it and being all crazy in the restaurant. And so I just thought that awkwardness was so good in him trying to explain to Martin how to work his huge phone. And then all of a sudden later on in the scene, that one scene where they emulate the Lady and the Tramp, where they had like the bread, and they had each other like basically biting on
Each side of the bread.
opposite sides of the bread. I just thought it was pretty funny. And it was just classic. And you know, Russell Peters, he just comes up with a straight face, but at the end of that scene, you're just kind of cracking up. And so that was mine. So the next award that we are going to be handing out, and we did touch on this last week also, it's the Yinsen Award. And Yinsen is featured prominently in Iron Man and Iron Man 3. And so this Yinsen Award is for underrated character. And Jeremy, what was your winner? Or who was your winner, I should say?
So, in my opinion, an underrated character in Chef had to be Martin. Like he was his line chef, right, in the actual restaurant. And he was just such a bro. He stuck with them, basically quit his job, traveled all the way to Florida just for him and help him out with this food truck. And it's like, it pays nothing, basically pays nothing right now.
Yeah.
But he's like, dude, I'm down. And I was like, dang, that's such a bro, such a good friend, and he was likable throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and plus he was so funny throughout the movie. Like his one-liners are probably the best,
Yeah.
arguably. But him and Tony both had the best one-liners.
Yeah, especially that one scene when they finally read the review, but they're a little bit too explicit in that one scene.
Yeah, where they're basically saying "F Twitter."
Hmm.
That was good. My winner for underrated character, actually the Yinsen Award, I should say, for underrated character was Molly, and that was played by Scarlett Johansson. And the reason why I picked Molly was because she was always there to support Carl. I felt like they did a really good job in writing her character in that they didn't force that romantic relationship with her and Carl. They even put the brakes on it. They even showed that on screen, which I thought was really good, especially since Carl was still estranged from Inez, and so I felt like she legitimately cared for Carl as a true friend. And so, plus, she was in one of my favorite scenes of the movie, is basically uh, when she was waiting for Chef Carl to create that pasta. Oh man, she looks so cute in that scene. And
Oh, I
so,
thought you were talking about the pasta. She looks so cute, the pasta. Yeah, it did.
but yeah, the pasta and
And
Molly.
Scarlet, yeah, and Molly.
But yeah, I thought they did a really good job writing her character. She was there to support Carl as a friend, nothing more. Yeah, it just basically along the same lines as Martin. I felt like they both were there for Carl when he needed him, legitimately. And so we've reached the point in our episode now where we are giving the big award. And so we call the award for favorite scene the Avengers Assemble Award, because that was basically the huge culmination of the MCU. If you remember that final scene in Avengers Endgame, when Captain America finally uttered the words Avengers Assemble. And so we thought we'd use that for the award for favorite scene. And so, Jeremy, do you want to go ahead and read all the nominees that we came up with for the Avengers Assemble Award?
Yes. So the nominees for the Avengers Assemble Award are in chronological order, starting with early on in the movie. Carl reading Ramsey Michelle's review. Just freaking waiting for that review, and when it's revealed that he totally got trashed, yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment for him.
Yeah, that review was brutal. I mean, the way the article was written, the words that were used, man, it like literally just stripped him basically of his manhood, his professional manhood as well. It I could see how it could throw Carl into a loop and just have a lot of self-doubt about like his ability and everything.
Yeah, and he gave him 2 stars, right? Man,
Yeah.
that's messed up.
Yeah.
That molten lava cake.
It's lava.
It's lava.
Oh, that was
man.
such a good scene too.
Our next nominee is the cleaning of the food truck, because when Marvin finally gives Carl his food truck, it's not exactly in the state that he expected it to be in. So it leads into this very cool montage of cleaning out the truck and scrubbing every little dirty inch of that food truck. And it transforms into this beautiful food truck by the end.
Oh yes, that was a good one.
The next scene would be the Cubano tutorial, which basically happens right after, and they're teaching Percy how to make one. And when they just kept eating the sandwiches and the cheese pulls there, ooh,
Oh yeah,
killer.
even before that, when they were still marinating the pork, and Percy was just even talking about, it's like, oh, is it like this? They sell it at the store or whatever. They were like, are you sure that's your kid? I'll tell you, Martin had like so many good one-liners in this movie, and man, that just looked really good just to eat, just little slivers at a time. Oh man,
Dude,
getting hungry again.
getting hungry again, but it won't stop because the next nominee would be trying out the brisket in Austin, Texas.
Oh,
Dude, when they brought out that slab of brisket and then he cut off the end of the brisket, ooh, man, you know that's the best part
oh
that he
man.
tried right there.
I want
I
to
was
just go to
dying.
Austin just for that.
Dude, I was dying from that barbecue, man. I would definitely go. Once this whole COVID thing is uh dying down, we'll try to get some brisket.
Yeah, we'll do a podcast on location.
That would be freaking crazy. The next nominee would be cornstarch when they're putting cornstarch in their pants. First, it was Martin. You know, he's getting a little bit humid down there, and then
Down there.
Percy, yeah, down there,
Like the location of the United States and down there as in down there.
yeah, down there this time. And Percy was like looking at Martin. He's like, "Hey, Dad," he's putting cornstarch down there, and it's like, "Here, you want some? Hey, try it."
Yeah, just cornstarch on the huevos, man. Oh, that was such a good scene. Definitely cracked me up.
Yeah. So, out of our 5 nominees, Ken, which is your winner?
Well, in kind of an upset because I really wanted to give it to the huevos and cornstarch scene because that did make me laugh probably the loudest the whole movie. I have to give it to the Cubano tutorial scene, and here's why. I mean, not only was it just like amazing just to see how a proper Cubano is like constructed and just how appetizing it looked. I mean, that was just basically the cherry on top. But I actually chose this for story purposes. I just thought that this scene was basically where both Carl's professional career was already on the mend. It was on an upswing, but also it coincided with his personal relationship with Percy, just strengthening. I mean, they were able to bond over something that they found, they just found something in common that they both like to do. And, just including Percy and teaching him like his passion and just to be able to just share those moments with him. Because I mean, Percy alluded to it earlier during the grilled cheese scene, is that he loved just the fact he loved those moments where all they were doing is just talking and just spending time with each other. And I think that's that point where Carl finally got it, and so other than the Cubano, I just thought it was a huge turning point for Carl as a character. And so that was my favorite part of the movie. That was my favorite scene.
Yeah. Well, my favorite scene of the movie, I think, has to be the cleaning of the food truck. Something's really like special about that. I think in a way it symbolizes Carl basically cleaning up his life, really throwing out all the bad stuff and forming something new out of it. I think that food truck very much symbolized uh, his professional career choices and his relationship with his son. Basically, like throwing out all the stuff that they don't need, and obviously they even got into a bit of a argument, him and Percy, at the end of that scene, and it was very much a tonal shift of all the struggles of the first half of the movie and switching into finally there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and they finally made their food truck.
Oh, no, that was good. And I just thought it was actually pretty funny that we both picked scenes where they were basically back-to-back scenes. Like first they had to clean out the truck. They had to throw out a lot of stuff, a lot of baggage, unload a bunch of stuff, clean everything up, and then just start from scratch and then put everything back together and then just like, just start building that foundation, just like with what he did with both his relationship with Percy and with his professional career. And so that's why we actually did mention that at the top of the episode. And so, Jeremy, we have now reached, I think, our favorite part of the episode, and that is the Guess the Rotten Tomatoes score. And so, for those of you who are just jumping in on this episode, what we do is we try to guess the Rotten Tomato score. We both come up with scores beforehand. Jeremy has his score. I have my score ready. And what we are doing is we're keeping a running tally with each passing episode. And so after episode 2, Jeremy is currently winning 3-2. And so, Jeremy, on Rotten Tomatoes scale, it's 1 to 100. What do you think Rotten Tomatoes gave Chef?
I'm gonna guess 90%.
Really? You thought it was that high, huh? You know, I was a little bit more. I thought it was a little bit more. I was more pessimistic in terms of the actual Rotten Tomato score. So 90, huh? Okay. Well, my score, or my guess, I should say, for the Rotten Tomatoes is a 78.
Really? Dang, that's a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
My reasoning is because I think it was a very fun movie.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know. I didn't trust my own rating with this because, I mean, we'll get to our own personal ratings later on. I definitely gave it higher than a 78, but I don't know. I don't trust critics.
Oh, man.
So let me go ahead and look this up right now. I'm on Rotten Tomatoes website right now, and let's type in Chef. And luckily, it's only 4 letters.
Oh, man. Here we go.
And so it looks like Jeremy is the winner for this week with a Rotten Tomato score of 87.
87. Whoa.
87. Interesting.
I actually thought it was going to be higher.
Yeah. So after episode 3, now Jeremy is expanding his lead. Oh, I could tell that he goes on Rotten Tomatoes more than I do. And so, again, we're going to keep this as a running segment, and hopefully I can close the gap next week. It's going to be tough because, next week is Jeremy's movie. And so, right now the score is now 4-2. Jeez.
4-2. It's all right, man. You got it next week. I guessed it lucky this week with your movie on your home turf of Chef.
I know. I got to think about it a little bit more. I feel like I'm overthinking Rotten Tomatoes scores. I should probably add a little bit more because I think the last movie that I guessed, I think I was on the lower end as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, with Iron Man 2.
Iron Man 2. Yeah. Jeez,
you gotta think like a critic sometimes.
I know. But sometimes I gotta think like a, one of those local critics, usually they'll give it a little higher. And then like more of the national ones, they'll be a little bit more tougher on it.
Yeah.
Especially these type of movies, a little bit more popcorn flicks type movies. So I don't know. I definitely gotta adjust my way of thinking for sure, starting with next week's episode. So we've now gotten to the point where we're giving out our last award. And so our last award is the award that we are naming it the I Love You 3000 Award. And for those of you who are fans of Avengers Endgame, that was a quote that was given by Morgan Stark, which was Tony Stark's daughter. And so the I Love You 3000 Award is basically our own personal rating for the movie. And we thought that since we are doing an MCU centric movie, we instead of rating it like on a letter grade scale like a lot of reviewers do, or a scale of 5 stars or 1 to 100. Yeah. And so we had a little bit of fun on episode 1 when we rated Dumb and Dumber 1 out of a million.
That was hard.
On that scale. But moving forward, we're actually going to rate we're going to give our ratings for these movies that we are going to be talking about a scale. We're going to be rating it on a scale of 1 to 3,000. And so, Jeremy, what was your rating for Chef?
Well, my rating out of 3,000, I think I would rate it 2610, which is funny because I gave it 87%. Because and it just so happened to be the Rotten Tomatoes score, but yeah, I wanted it to be 87% because I knew I would give it kind of a B plus, not so much like the A, but yeah, 2610 out of 3,000.
This is crazy.
What happened?
87% Rotten Tomatoes. Jeremy gave it 80%, 87%. I gave it 2,610 as well for 87%. Man, I should have trusted my own self.
Oh man, same score. I did not. I thought you were gonna add at least like 26-13 or something like that.
I was thinking about it when you gave your 2610, but I was like, I can't. That was a rating that I gave beforehand, and that just proves to you that we don't really talk about ratings beforehand. And we come up with these things before we do record, and so that's
we don't tell
funny.
each other. So
That's hilarious. 87%. So you know what? I think I just need to trust my own rating. I think I'll just rate. I'll give my rating, and I'll use that for my Rotten Tomato score.
Yeah, maybe, man. You gotta trust yourself sometimes.
Exactly. And so, Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and preview episode 4?
Well, next week, grab your cameras and let's drive into the night with Nightcrawlers, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. It's another movie from 2014 that took me by surprise, and I know Ken hasn't seen it yet. So if you love complex characters and are interested in the world of TV news, tune in next week when we talk about Nightcrawler.
Oh man, I am looking forward to watching it. It's one of those where I think you've been telling me about Nightcrawler for so long. I think you and Jacob, another one of our friends, has been telling me to watch it for so long, and I just never got around to it. And so I'm kind of glad that this podcast is forcing me to finally get to watch this movie. And like you mentioned before, it's like one of your favorite movies of all time, right?
Of all time, I don't want to spoil that yet. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about that. You know, a little bit of a teaser for episode 4. A lot of teasers. A lot of teasers.
If you're listening to this before next week, it is on Netflix right now. We're not sponsored by Netflix, but if you want to watch the movie first and you haven't seen it, Nightcrawler is on Netflix right now.
Yes. So yeah, it'd be nice to be able to have you guys listen to it ahead of time, maybe the weekend before our Monday release. And so that when the podcast does get released, you can be one of the first to listen to the podcast episode. And so definitely looking forward to next week, watching something new for in terms of watching a new movie for me. And so before we get to next week, Jeremy, do you have anything to plug?
Well, if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can follow me at JP_flicks. I don't post too much. I'm not that active on social media, but I do post once in a while, either updating my own YouTube channel or updating you guys on weekly reel. So if you want to follow me at JP_flicks, you can follow me there. How about you, Ken?
Well, for me, you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm a little bit more active. This is, again, I mentioned it last week. This is the most active that I've been in years. And so you could follow me at FreakinA. That's at free_Ken_A. And again, that's at Twitter. That's on Twitter and Instagram. And so was there anything else that you wanted to mention before we call it an episode?
Dude, I'm hungry now because of Chef.
Yeah. We you know what? I need to take you to Soul Food again. That way we could get some Cubanos or something like that. So good.
Yeah, for sure. But I can almost guarantee next week after watching Nightcrawler, you're gonna want to start making vlogs again.
Ooh, teaser. I love it.
Teaser.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'll definitely keep that in mind when I watch it this upcoming weekend in preparation for episode 4. And so, if there's nothing else, Jeremy, we'll want to thank you all out there for listening and supporting our podcast. And we'll see you next week on The Reel.